From Cornwall to Birmingham and Johnston and Bexhill, here's Ruben Spar on the radio.
Hello to Jo Beth Young. How are you today?
Hi, Ruben. I'm very well. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for letting me chat to you today. So, can you tell me how long have you been a singer-songwriter for?
Well, this would be a lifelong situation. I've sang all my life, and I've actually written songs since I was very, very young. So I'd say I'm just a naturally born singer-songwriter, but it didn't become more professional till I got into my sort of late teens. That's when I started pursuing it properly.
So, what was it like going to the recording studio when you first went there?
The very first time. Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, because the kind of bands that I was in when I was in my early 20s, we would have been like indie bands, and we used to record in some really dodgy studio. So I don't think I was intimidated or found it too glamorous, because they were often just very rundown places with a mixing desk, a battered old mixing desk in the corner. But I think the first time I went and did real recording when I was a bit older, I think that was when I went to a really, really proper studio, would have been when I was in my late 20s. And that was a totally different experience. And it was exciting. It was nerve-wracking and exciting. But I love the studio. I find it a really creative space.
So, can you talk more about your first album that you released called Strangers?
So actually, that isn't my first album, believe it or not. I was in a duo called Talitha Rise, and the first album we released was called Blue. It was a mini album, but the main album we released was An Abandoned Orchid House, and that was before Strangers came out. So do you want me to tell you about Strangers or the very first albums? Huh?
You can tell about the first one and Strangers if you want.
Okay. So, Orchid House really was the first proper album, I would say, in fullness that I released, and that was in Talitha Rise. And during that was with Martin Barker from Shriekback, who's an amazing drummer and writer. We had a collaboration for some years that was, really, really fantastic. And that album was a real labour of love of all the work that we'd done together. And we'd co-written and co-produced and so forth. And then Strangers was the first album I made entirely on my own, as in I entirely recorded it and I entirely produced it. But obviously I wasn't alone, because I had amazing musicians on it. It was Strangers, it was a very raw, personal album. That's what I would say.
So can you talk about Invisible Fishing?
Invisible Fishing, Invisible Fishing was also something that I did as a little side project. When I was in Talitha Rise, I did some music under the name Kalite. I changed it over to my real name later on. But it was a song I actually wrote when I was in France. I wrote a whole EP when I was going through France. And Invisible Fishing was one of those tracks, and it's still one that's very dear to my heart.
So can you talk about, or tell me more about Mechanical Ballerina?
Mechanical Ballerina was written for a play, a film that was made during lockdown by an amazing photographer, filmmaker in America called Carl Cassidy. And it actually was originally an instrumental I did for the lead character. It was a reimagining of Ibsen's A Doll's House. And this was written originally for the lead character, Nora. And he asked me if I would make it into a song, so I did. So it's actually about her but it fits on Broken Spells perfectly because it's the right theme. It's another broken spell.
So it must have been quite a hard time being a musician during lockdown.
Do you know, it was the most productive, amazing time for me. You're not supposed to say that, but I'll tell you some really interesting things. One is I had shows booked in 2020, and at the end of 2019, I cancelled them all. I just had a strong gut feeling not to do them. And everyone thought I was absolutely bonkers at the time. Like, why would you cancel all these shows? And then, of course, lockdown happened. So I had some sort of prescient foresight. But those couple of years of lockdown where I live in Ireland, I was super productive. I did a whole album with Night Song, a folk trio. I did that film, the Ibsen film. I did the soundtrack for another film called The Clear that's coming out later. I did another soundtrack for a film on Mary Shelley. I was super productive, and I did a lot of this current album as well. So for me, it was a rich time, actually.
So can you tell me more about Bridget?
Yeah, Bridget is a very it's a special track for me on Broken Spells because I had lupus for many years, and during that time, which was during lockdown, I was losing the use of my left hand through arthritis that comes with lupus, and I thought I wouldn't be able to play guitar again, which was pretty shocking after it being my main instrument for years. And it was the end of January, and I couldn't even open jars or can openers. I was really losing the power in this hand, and I was very depressed about this, as you can imagine. And I sat down one night and messed around with a load of loops, which I've never done before. And I sat up all night and I wrote Bridget on my laptop. And by the time the morning came, I was so ecstatic because I realized that I could still make songs and records without picking up a guitar if I couldn't do it anymore. And that morning was the 1st of February. It was St. Bridget's Day. So I named the song Bridget. But I am now fully recovered and I can play guitar again, as anyone on tour would have seen me. But yeah, that's an interesting story behind that one.
So can you tell us more about Wolf Song?
Wolf Song is it's a song I actually wrote after Orchid House was sort of winding down, and it was written on a broken guitar at my friend's house that only had 2 strings. That's why it's got this very rudimentary picking pan. And what is it about? It's kind of about looking at the narcissist wound, if you like, from a very symbolic angle. And it's kind of, yeah, looking at it from the angle that you've seen it, you recognize it, you know that person's game, but you also feel sympathy for them because they're kind of trapped in their own, suffering at the same time.
So can tell me more about Standstill?
So Standstill is the second track on that album that was written for a film. So it is actually for The Clear, which is a film that's currently under production. And it was written from the point of view of the lead character in that film. But again, like any film music I do, it's drawing on your own experience. So Standstill really is about not being able to outrun your sin, if you like, or your darkness, and that, you know, you can't get away from those things. They have to be confronted in the end.
So can you tell me more about Wisecreen Records? What's that all about?
So I started Wisecreen Records myself. It was just, I actually had a small label to release Orchid House under originally. And I had a really lovely record label that I was working with then, Sonic Bond, who are a prog label that I really love. But when it came to making Strangers, I just realized I wanted complete autonomy. So I set up Wisecreen Records to take control of my own releases, really, and to help friends. I've got such amazingly talented friends that didn't have labels to put things out through, so I put them out through Wise Queen, which was 100% non-profit, so they keep 100% of what they make. It's just to give them some security for their music, basically.
So, Kitty, because I know you've been working on Broken Spells for quite some time. It's about 4 years, isn't it?
Yes, it is 4 years, yeah. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is that I was, as you can hear, struggling with my health. I had a massive spiritual breakthrough in my life. I went from being a lifelong pagan to a born-again Christian. And a lot of that album is about what happened and, what I realized and the spells that broke in my life that took me to that spiritual revelation. And also, I applied for a grant 5 times to finish the album. So I had it all written and all mainly recorded. I just needed to get, the mixing and the manufacturing and all of that done and promotion. And I got rejected 5 times. So it was very disheartening, but I decided to do it all myself. So I mixed half the album myself. The other half is by the incredible Kev Bolus. And I basically took charge of all the production with a little bit of assistance from Matt Blackie and Kerry Glynn. And yeah, this is probably the most self-made record I've ever done. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention. But all of that is exceptionally time consuming. If you're doing it all yourself, it just takes a long time. So there we go.
So, can you tell me more about Broken Spells? What other tracks are on there?
So there's 10 tracks on the album, and you've mentioned Wolf Song, you've mentioned Bridget, you've mentioned Standstill, and Mechanical Ballerina. So that's 4 of them. So there are other tracks on there that it's quite a varied album, I would say. So there's a track called Occam's Razor, which is about the theory of Occam's Razor, which in short is the theory that the truth is often the simplest thing and lies are often complicated. There's a song called Burning, which is the first track I wrote for the album, which is like a prog track, which is exploring the themes of what may happen to us as a race if we don't appreciate the small things that we have. And yeah, it's a very charged album in the sense that it is about spells, and it is about what are spells, because spells can be things people say over your life. Like if someone says something to you as a child, like, oh, you'll never come to much, you're not very intelligent, you're this, you're that, whatever it is, that in effect is a spell. Because if we believe it, then it can haunt us all our lives. And we also have spells politically put over us, collectively, spiritually, all kinds of things. So this album, every track is about breaking a certain personal or collective spell.
So will you be working on any new music in the near future?
I will, absolutely. I have another project. In fact, I have a few things lined up this year that I've been desperate to get on with, but I have had to stop until this album is over. So yes, you will be hearing more music from me, but maybe a bit different because of the spiritual changes and the life changes that I've been through. It really is a new beginning, and I'm learning a lot of new things creatively right now too.
So have you got any gigs coming up to promote your new album?
No, and the reason for that is that my tour last year was the album promotion tour. It was a month and a half on the road with the amazing Sirius Child and my lovely band members, Ben Roberts and Ella Parsington and Pete Lamb. And originally the album was meant to be finished by then, and that was supposed to be the tour. But, just life and how intensely complicated making an album like this is. It's, you know, some of the songs are like 90 stems long, and you know, it's a lot of work. So it just took me longer than I thought, and booking the tour took 16 months as well. So it's done. I've already done the album promotion tour. However, I will be doing a couple of one-off shows later this year, just special one-off shows.
So can you tell me more about how's being an independent artist for you?
It's a mixed bag. I think any independent artist would agree with me. It's been a real lesson. I think I've been in the industry and I've also been an independent artist outside of it. So I think I've had a fortunate position in that I know how the machinery works from the inside, and I know how the machinery works from the outside. And I think there are many benefits to being an independent artist. I think the internal machinery of the music industry has an inherent darkness in it. You know, it's easy to get sucked into, like a vortex, certain pathways that perhaps don't bring you well-being or peace as an artist. And being a DIY artist affords you integrity. It affords you autonomy over your work and your image and your product. And it affords you, flexibility. What it also requires is an excessive amount of work. You've got to really be in it because you deeply love it. And it does, I think, propagate, for want of a better word, a much more deep relationship with your audience. But yeah, if you are in it because you love it, then being a DIY artist, I think, is absolutely fine. But if you're in it because you want to achieve great heights, I think it can be very frustrating for people where their ambition is that way, if that makes sense.
So finally, can you tell my listeners, where can I find you on your social media?
So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, my website, Jo Beth Young. I'm on all the normal suspects, basically. If you just type my name in, you will find me on some form or another.
Thank you for letting me chat to you today.
Thanks for having me, Ruben. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.